Welcome back. This is part 3 of Sibylla's story. Let's continue the journey with the new chapter titled Drifting.
Better to be a little wise than in knowledge to abound. Better to teach a child than toil to fill perfection's round. Better to sit at a master's feet than thrill in a listening state. Better suspect that thou art proud than be sure that thou art great. George MacDonald. Tomorrow the college will close. The summer vacation lay before Wolfe like a blank, unwritten page. An enjoyable winter and a delightful summer lay behind him. Parties and balls, picnics and concerts in their turn. The summer had been somewhat more quiet than the winter, and this was fortunate as Wolfe could not neglect his severe studies, and he had recently worked so diligently to keep his grade that he felt quite satisfied with his progress. Something else, therefore, is the cause of contracting wrinkles in his forehead. His rent had been reckoned with other expenses, and while he counted the balance of ready money, he discovered, to his annoyance, that he had expended far too much. He might have economized more, he must confess, for even in the society life in which he moved, there was not a very great pecuniary drain upon young men. But it brought with it, naturally, some gift obligations, and these Wolfe had dispensed with greater liberality than his circumstances permitted. What was to be done? It could not continue any longer, but it would be difficult to forsake the beaten track and walk in a private path. Wolfe looked out of the window and saw some of his happy comrades pass along the street. Diplomas in hand, they are going out into the wide world. How beautiful it will be in the Tyrol, in Switzerland, in Italy. But he must deny himself the pleasure of travel for want of sufficient means to defray expenses. And then, in the light of a reproving conscience, he asks himself honestly, do I deserve this recreation after my year's work? Seldom and brief have been the letters to his mother. How little he has thought of those nearest to him. And yet a home is there still, and friends who love and think of the distant one. Here at Berlin everybody is going away, and no one inquires about his going or remaining. But among the crowd of people hurrying by, Wolfe sees no more of them. His eye skirts the distance and reflects the blue sea with the gulls flying over its billows. Yonder stands the lowly cottage with its brown thatched roof. At the window the form of his mother, waiting patiently for her son. Wolfe throws himself on a couch and buries his face in his hands. Upon another day he is hastening home. The last stretch of the way lies behind him. Evening approaches as he nears the end of his journey. The surroundings become more and more familiar. Old recollections are awakened. Everything rises up before his footsteps as a sunken world. There is the beach, the home beach, the very one he formerly spent his turbulent desires. On the strand lie boats, even his own is there. And now the windows of the little cottage where he once dwelt glisten in the sun's departing rays. The simple garden with its hollyhocks and 4 o'clocks is just the same, everything unchanged, but himself. The first greetings are over. The joy of reunion was great, so great that few words are spoken. Wolfe gazes upon his mother. Yes, she has grown older. Is it excessive care that has whitened her locks so much? And the mother would read in Wolfe's face whether he is still her honest, unstained son. "Wolfe, you look pale. Have you studied too hard?" "No, mother, but naturally one is more indoors at Berlin than here. I still look dark there compared with others." Karen has observed her brother from all sides and asks, "But what do you have such fine linen for, and such a fine hat?" Wolfe blushes. "Yes, Karen, one must dress differently there, but that is nothing." The mother announces supper. "We have only oatmeal," she says. "I did not know you were coming." "Mother, I'm so glad. It is so long since I have eaten any porridge." Soon the humble repast was served, and Wolf did full justice to it. But yet it was not agreeable for him to see how Karen held her spoon and how old Peter ate. The supper ended, all sat by the door, and the neighbors came to greet Wolf heartily. He is very happy and relates stories of Berlin, to which all listen with open mouths. Even his mother feels a certain additional respect for him to hear that he has really seen the king several times, although it seems rather incredible that he has not seen his golden crown. A king without a crown? No, she knows better. Wolf talks well. Even old Peter lays aside his nets and listens to the marvelous tales. At times he shakes his head doubtfully, and even for days after refuses to believe wholly without some token more visible to his senses. A few days afterwards, Wolf called upon Captain Nielsen and his daughter, who had been visiting their pastor. Alas, Ingeborg had only grown paler and feebler, but her deep blue eyes had gained, if possible, in expression. She knows much of Wolf's life and efforts, for the Carrings had but recently left the beach, and she had been a great deal with them. Once more the days pass as old in Frau Eriksson's cottage, but there is sunshine within, now that her son has returned. Yes, he is a good boy, and has begged his mother's forgiveness for having written so little. He tries to help in every way, but she declines with, "There is so little to do, and you must study and not spoil your hands." He tries to work, but there are many lonely, unoccupied hours. During these times, he takes Ingeborg out on the water. It is a pleasure for the sturdy fellow to test his strength with the oars, to battle with the winds and waves, and master them.
On Sundays, all rest by attending church. "You go to church every Sunday at Berlin?" inquires the mother by the way. This question has been dreaded for some time. It might afford her joy to hear him say yes, but Wolf, true to his nature, frankly says, "Only occasionally." "Occasionally? Why not always?" is the astonished reply. "What then do you do on Sundays?" "I study, or else do not much of anything." "I have thought," continued the mother somewhat constrainedly, "it might be well for you to study your catechism again." "Mother, you don't understand," replied Wolf finally. "One learns to consider many other things if one is clever. Prayer, for example." "Oh, never mind," interrupts Karen. "You are too clever for us." Wolf would continue the controversy, but Ingeborg's gentle voice adds, "Wolf wants to prove everything, but yet, after all, isn't it lovelier to attend church on Sunday mornings in this way?" They had now reached the little unpretentious house of God. The bell was ringing through the clear air, and from all directions people in neat attire were entering. It was a beautiful sight, and Wolf nodded assent to Ingeborg's question and said, "You are right." In the evening he read willingly a selection from a volume of sermons, but his thoughts were far away, and he was heartily glad when the Amen was reached. Wolf rarely went out with his mother and sister. After the first pleasure of seeing them again was over, he could not conceal the fact that they had remained unchanged. It had been so different in his own case that involuntarily he had expected progress among those at home. But a kind of petrification seemed to lie over this corner of the earth. The few summer guests with their gay attire were like the day flowers which sprang up between the rocks. They did not take root here, and were soon gone. But beneath the rocks rushed living springs of which Wolf had no knowledge, and therefore were undiscovered. He was always dissatisfied here, and time went on crutches. His life-work, which mightily stirred him, was absent. He was no longer congenial to his old acquaintances, and they had become as narrow to him as a garment outgrown. And while he could regard his mother's employment with genuine respect and recognize the superiority of her simple, homely faith, he could not share her life and opinions.
He loved to stroll on the beach alone. Was he happier now? Had he attained his desires? It could not be denied that he was richer in knowledge, but did the feeling never present itself that there was something wanting to his life? What was it? Something that his mother and those around her possessed in common. Was it their religious faith? Never, for that was only fit for close-sighted people. Was it the constant study attendant upon his profession? No, he enjoyed this labor. Then what was it? He could not tell. Was it then the stirrings within of conscience? Happiness, happiness, thought Wolf. How shall I win it? Will it bow down graciously before me, or must I attain it by ardent endeavors over rough paths? Which form will it take? He threw himself on the sea sands, closed his eyes, and meditated long. But the meditation was only dreaming, in which happiness appeared to him white and glistening, accompanied by charming melodies. She sat at his feet and sang sweet songs of love and pleasure. "Sibylla," murmured the dreamer. And then the siren sang more confidently, laying her hand on his arm as the tones grew stronger. Suddenly he awoke. What was that? The bands of the dream were broken. The reality appeared before his astonished gaze. He had lain in a place which the flood tide covered. Lightly the waters were rising and approaching him, intoxicating their victim with the spirit of music in order to more surely to destroy him. He had awakened just at the critical moment. He felt the cold water rippling about his neck, and with one bound he was in a place of safety. Why did he look with such terror on the clear water? Was it the sudden shock that held him spellbound? For it is no small matter to have death so near. Ah, no, Wolf was not thinking of death. Other, and to him even graver thoughts moved him. Was this dream, then, a vision of his future? Should happiness approach him with ensnaring flatteries only to destroy him? These were the thoughts that stirred Wolf's soul as he slowly sauntered home some hours later. At a fashionable bathing resort in the mountains, we find Lady Obrist von Herbig and her daughter Sibylla. The latter, with her burning thirst for freedom, evinces her enjoyment in her beaming face. She is like a bird set free from a cage. Now she is with nature, which is so beautiful language cannot describe it, and which only persons of deep appreciation can perceive. Was Sibylla happy? There was indeed not wanting to her that pure joyfulness which nature bestows as a heritage, but she did not live in an atmosphere that called the gift into full exercise. She was not wholly free. Her mother is near, and any opposition to her wishes was unthought of. Just at this moment, her mother, a stout little woman, is sitting on the veranda of one of the bathing houses. A school director from the provinces is beside her. His attenuated figure looks as if it had been hewn out of wood. His forest of white hair stands high and bristling, and his long arms gesticulate with solemn profundity. Report says he is an author. Conversation between the two is fashioned upon pedagogical questions. These are dangerous principles upon which the youth of the present are shaped, announces the schoolman pathetically. Oh, the young girls, exclaims Lady von Herbig. Only look at them. Where is nature? These artificial frizzes, these frivolous engagements. Instead of being like flowers, they dress like canary birds. The emancipation of women, continues the pedagogue heedlessly. This false self-reliance, this independent judgment, this free and easy manner, while young girls should consider it rather their first duty to assiduously avoid everything bizarre in their behavior. Where is poetry, always to be found in a sensitive heart? Nature is banished. Lady von Herbig interjects, vainly attempting to keep her companion to the text.
Nature must be restored. Aesthetic pictures nowadays present womanliness as more perfect than consecration to reality. Both agree and rejoice over their mutual intellectuality. Be assured, on the next morning Lady von Herbig will purchase a red gilt-edged book, the latest work of the school director.
Sibylla sits alone, with busy pencil. She has written the following in her journal. How beautiful it is to lead a dewless, easy, enjoyable life. Mornings, paint a little. At noon, partake of a fine dinner, a nap. Then reading, walking or bathing, or a concert, etc. A plate of strawberries with sour cream, reveling enough. Then a comfortable bed. All earnest thoughts rest in the lumber room of my brain. If I could only have my own way and enjoy nature. The woods appear to be very beautiful, but my fondest desires go out to the fresh, sparkling, rushing mountain springs for which I long every morning and dream. There my life could have full play. Ah, the sunshine amid the leaves and the air! But I am in a rendezvous of the beau monde, a great decorated hall where music is playing, ladies promenading in elegant toilettes and banged hair. Gentlemen sit reading newspapers, smoking, and playing at cards. There are amusing people, too, one exceedingly handsome Hungarian with the physiognomy of a gypsy. A stout major is continually passing me with a conscious élan of presence, his steps taken with dancing precision. That appears to be the highest attainment in life here. It is too comical to see all the gentlemen walking in this way, while their eyes are either centered upon the gaming table or seeking a pair of more beautiful eyes among the ladies. In the morning it is dancing for a church. Yesterday they danced for relief to a city where there had been a conflagration. There is no calamity too great, but they are ready to dance for it. Oh, and the people seem to regard music as something to be seen, not listened to, for it only affords opportunity for increased conversation. But the best folks here are the children. They are worth looking at. Near every little spring is found a group of little ones, so quaint and pretty in their simple national costumes. On the whole, I prefer this place to Berlin, and tiresome city people I need to see only at a distance. I wonder whether Solomon, after he obtained possession of his wise heart, ever found anything that was particularly wearisome. I am reading a very intellectual English romance in 3 volumes, Herder's Ideas of Humanity and Rosenkranz's Psychology of the Subjective. And I am still able to enjoy what is good, whether I find it in a plate of strawberries or a beautiful fir. To think upon the good in everything keeps one always fresh in spirit, and is best, I think. The postman now approached Lady von Herbig and gave her letters. Sibylla was not curious and remained quietly resting in her place. A vehement movement and a light cry, however, brought her quickly to her mother's side. "No, is it possible one has lived to see such a thing?" exclaims Lady von Herbig in great indignation. "It is revolting, atrocious!" "What has happened?" asked Sibylla calmly. A long experience enables her to know that these outbursts of her mother never have any real and sufficient foundation. "What has happened? Oh, she was always a singular person, but her family never should have permitted this." "Has anyone been betrothed against your will?" asked Sibylla. "To be betrothed is the destination of young women, and everyone who fails to make a man happy in domestic life fails in her calling," is the frigid reply. Sibylla turns away. It is impossible for her to believe that marriage is the sole destination of a woman, but she would not controvert her voluble mother and starts to go away. "Sibylla, my sweet child, thank God it is something you would never do," cries Lady von Herbig impetuously, and fearful lest her daughter should leave before she could tell her, she adds quickly, "Fräulein Theodora von Kering has gone to a cholera hospital to nurse patients there.
Of course, she can have no communication whatever with her family, nor indeed with anyone in the entire outer world. In one word, she might as well be in a convent. Oh, this exalted fanaticism! Sibylla received the news in astonishment. Her lips were compressed in passionate agitation. What was going through the mind of this proud young woman? After a slight pause, she remarks, "No, the charge of fanaticism can never be laid to Theodora. On the contrary, she is really calm and cold-hearted." Lady von Herbig continued to read her letter. "The cholera rages at Berlin. All the best families have left the city. The Carings remain in a most incomprehensible manner. How can they permit their daughter to sacrifice herself in this manner? I would never expose my daughter so, and we too must not remain here long. My daughter would never compromise me in this way." My daughter, at this moment, is seated again before her journal, staring upon the lines she had just written. How beautiful to lead a dewless, easy, enjoyable life! She had not penned this in any momentary impulse. It was the impression of her soul. But she did not refer to the dolce far niente of a fashionable watering place, but to the entire present life. And yet, here had been one young woman not only able to look with contempt upon the proprieties of conventionality, but who had been strong enough to break these little bands and to perform a clearly recognized duty. "Something you would never do." These words rang continually in Sibylla's ears. "No, I would never do it," she said in her frank way. "I am too cowardly, too conservative, too proud for that. Oh, to nurse such patience! How horrible! No, I would never do it." But why was Sibylla unable to rid herself of these words? She would gladly do so. Was it the power of their truth from which she could not escape? And yet she had simply replied to her mother's lamentation over this unheard-of action, "No, I would be too useless for any such service." Whereupon Lady von Herbig raised her hands in horror as she looked upon her lovely daughter. She desired to say something else, but contented herself with, "You must always contradict me, even if you don't mean it." Then she went off to write letters to the more congenial spirits who did not continually oppose her. Sibylla was silent, but could not banish Theodora from her thoughts. She had recently seen her rarely, as the much older girl did not appear in society, but now she was constantly present before Sibylla. "When I return to Berlin, I shall seek out this Theodora. She shall be my friend. Of this I am determined," was her firm resolve.
This marks the end of Chapter 7. We now move into the next chapter of Sibylla's story, titled Enjoyment is Life.
He that leaves out of this brief life eternal blessedness deceives himself and builds upon the rainbow. Friedank. Wolf has returned to Berlin. His heart beats high, and it seems to him as though he had just arrived home, his real home, to visit. He greets his books as old friends and is delighted to be with them again. As he steps to the window and looks down on the variegated, active life picture below, he feels himself a part of it. And all the dwellings around about, in which thousands of lives pulsate, how much joy and happiness they may conceal for him. They are both there, and it only remains for him to knock at the doors to find them. But first he will seek happiness in work. Without being fully aware of it, he has learned much during the past few weeks. His mother's and sister's faithful discharge of duties has not been without its influence upon him. He is almost ashamed of himself when he compares his efforts with theirs. The world wolf has indeed inhaled, but there is a good kernel in the boy, for he is his mother's son. His work renewed, Wolf seeks his old friends, and before he is conscious of it, he is again swimming in the current of society's tempestuous waters. It is all just as of old, so attractive, so brilliant. People greet Wolf as one they had seen but yesterday. They inquire indifferently of his travels. In fact, they have not missed him. Has he become any more unworthy by having visited his home friends? Why is he cut with such cool recognition? A lodestone lies upon him today, and he feels himself a stranger among those he well knows.
Conversation is carried on concerning the news of the day, what such a noted tenor sings, or such a celebrated actor plays. Wolf is not yet en rapport with the times, and cannot therefore join in it. Interesting matters are stirring, in which he has no share. Has everybody changed, or has he become different? Yet there are several persons to whom Wolf's entree is especially interesting. Olga von Steinfels is only too gratified to see him again, and the place suddenly becomes attractive to her because he is present. How long her eyes have sought in vain for his manly form and bronzed face. What a sensation thrills her to think how this young man might influence her poor little life. But he is seeking Sibylla, the undisputed queen, as usual, of all assemblies. It is said of the rainbow that if it remained stationary a quarter of an hour, we should never care to look upon it. Sibylla cannot therefore be a rainbow, but rather a star, which one loves the more the longer one beholds it. And yet outwardly she resembles the rainbow, with its continued changes of form and color, more than the quiet star. Finally, Wolf has an opportunity to approach her, but she greets him curtly and lightly as ever, and the fact that she immediately begins a lively conversation with him is for the purpose of ridding herself of a disagreeable chatterer whom she will not permit to lead his prey as easily as he solicits. "May I be allowed to escort Fraulein Sibylla to supper?" "Thank you, I am engaged," she replies coldly. Dr. Uhlhardt is standing near. He knows Sibylla well enough to be assured that she is not telling the truth. And now supper is announced, and the couples begin to form. He approaches her with, "May I be permitted?" offering his arm. Sibylla is exasperated. Is she then so bound to him that he is able to wield her as he wishes? Proudly and haughtily she replies, "Has not Dr. Uhlhardt been standing near enough to hear that I am already engaged?" Dr. Uhlhardt bit his lips and stepped back as Sibylla looked him steadily in the eye. Wolf has heard nothing of all this, having been engaged in conversation with a professor. As the couples begin to pass out to the supper room, Sibylla looks anxiously around for a rescuer. If only some old gentleman would come, with whom she could go informally. Uhlhardt stood with sneering smile, enjoying her discomfiture. Wolf has just observed her. Has she no escort? The next instant he is at her side, and she has taken his arm, the two bringing up the rear of the procession. Wolf's act had been so quick in perception that Sibylla made a remark she would have done to no one else. Her face beaming with pleasure, she exclaimed, "Oh, you have saved me!" and thereupon related her embarrassment. Wolf was happy, yes, delighted, and Sibylla permitted him to escort her when it pleased her. Dr. Uhlhardt observed the two with disapproving glance, and his heart nursed bitter thoughts. Arnold von Karing also observed how happy Sibylla seemed to be with Wolf, and over his countenance flashed an ugly expression. But Arnold was an enemy no one need fear. At table, chance placed Olga von Steinfels and Herr von Lenksöring vis-à-vis Sibylla and Wolf. The latter chafed inwardly to hear the exaggerated compliments that Lenksöring was paying to the poor child beside him, who appeared to lend a too willing ear. He well knew it was Olga's fortune, not her, that the flatterer loved, and he pitied the poor girl. But why should he care?
At this moment, Lady von Karing, who was always an authority in spiritual matters, turned the conversation to a young clergyman who had been attracting general attention. He had introduced high liturgical views, and now the question was whether this kind of divine service would be acceptable to the Berlin churchmen. While the different pros and cons were being advanced, Sibylla suddenly turned to Wolf and asked if he did not wish to defend the absent clergyman. He excused himself, and Sibylla continued, "You have surely admired our beautiful church from without." "Both from without and within. I have attended service there several times," replied Wolf. "Ah, indeed," she said, somewhat satirically, and without waiting for further explanation, she added with animation, "I am no friend of the Roman Catholics, but their custom of keeping their churches open daily is one I envy, especially if they be beautiful ones. With us, no one can enjoy a beautiful church without taking with it a tiresome preacher."
Wolf looked up approvingly. He had often indulged the same sentiment, but he asked, "Are all preachers, then, tiresome?" "Naturally." He was obliged to laugh at her frankness, but he inquired whether she ignored all the pleasure of divine service. Sibylla was silent a moment, then said, "No, largely, and I may say on the whole, there is a certain churchly festivity there. The number of people assembled, the strangeness of the place, the organ music and singing, all these contain elements calculated to elevate. But the services should be shorter and more beautiful and artistic." "For the ordinary person, the common people, this would be of little value," ventured Wolf. "Do you think so? Oh, I am sure that art is not without its influence upon everybody. But I ask, how many people there are who have lost all sentiment for the beautiful? Do you not observe how every workman, every tradesman undervalues it in his anxiety to make money in these realistic times?" interjected Wolf. "When a child has heard and seen nothing of her mother for years, she may forget her for a time, but bring the child back to her, do you not think her natural love will be reawakened, and she will fare nowhere so well as in her mother's arms?" "Nowhere so well," reiterated Wolf. "Shall not then religion satisfy the ordinary man or woman best?" "Try it," replied Sibylla curtly, "and as certainly as we prefer joy to pain, just so surely will art make life joyous and religion render life gloomy." I hesitated a long time to which I should give the preference, art or Christianity, she added in a subdued voice, but I hesitate no longer. I feel that I am formed for happiness, and I intend to enjoy life. "You are in error," responded Wolf earnestly, "and you do not understand the essence of true art. Art and religion are intimately connected." "I thought so once, and for a long time sought to unite the two, but the fundamental ideas of religion contradict the essence of art." "Both bring to greater perfection, both strive for harmony," persisted Wolf. "Oh, I think art will do more than make people merely virtuous. That she cannot and does not do, but she permits people to be happy, and this Christianity never allows. Where does the Bible exhort to joy and enjoyment? Deny thyself, thou shalt deny thyself, is the everlasting precept. Our minister preaches nothing but self-denial, conflict, and sin, while art encourages happiness at all times." How beautiful the young woman looked as she uttered these daring words. Wolf was not convinced by the latter, but he was continually attracted towards the fair speaker. Now he said, "Still, in every art lies a struggle for some principle in order to establish a lofty thought or a spiritual ideal." "Yes, indeed," responded Sibylla. "When I was at school, a pedantic instructor declared his conception of the beautiful as spiritual substance in a more complete form. But the thought is still a human thought, and the form not of the life of this world, which, according to the teaching of Christianity, is destructive and sinful. Greek art makes the human body its ideal, but what says Christianity? Perishable dust, perishable and corruptible. Beneath a picture of life is the hateful form of death, with the moral, despise the beauty and good of this world, resign them for an uncertain hope in a nebulous future, torment yourself, destroy your dearest wishes, and all for what? For a faith that no one is sure if it is true or not. We have the gods of the Greeks, their myths and sayings we must throw aside for a new light. Who shall assure us that just such a fate shall await religion in later times? Everything changes. One opinion controverts another. Where is truth?" With increasing astonishment, Wolf listened to the excited girl. Then he said, "But how do you reconcile the thought of the end with happiness? There comes a time when life ceases." "Is a short happiness then no happiness? Just because life flies so quickly, I shall enjoy it. Besides, it increases gratitude and praise to the Creator to rejoice in a world He has made so beautiful. I fulfill His will when I am happy." A pause ensued. The views were new to Wolf. He felt that they were superficial, but he bade them welcome. There still lay in his heart a remnant of godly fear, but he decided to investigate both sides of the question. His studies had often said to him, "God's word is not true," and life everywhere around cried, "We do not need it." He listened to these voices, but they had not mastered him. Something drew him away from them, but today this something was silent.
Sibylla had spoken. What to think he scarcely yet knew. She continued, "Narrow fetters and barriers, rigorous injunctions and commands are the methods to torture and embitter men. Art leads to freedom. It is the guiding star of our intellect and our endeavors. It fills our hearts with her beauty and remains our consolation in the misfortunes of our greatest calamities." The supper table had become deserted. Soon after, the guests separated to their homes. Who carried anything with him from this company? Whose heart was richer? Whose strivings nobler? Whose love had grown warmer? Who had found refreshment from business cares? Who had gained one true friend? No one went away richer than he came, but did no one return to his home poorer? When Wolf entered his chamber, his first glance fell on a skull that lay on his writing table. "So will you look in time," said something within loudly. "Then I shall enjoy life if it be so short, for enjoyment is life."
This marks the end of Chapter 8. We now move into the next chapter of Sibylla's story, titled Love Unto Death.
A long, long time since that voice was heard, the only one my heart has stirred. Nothing has thrilled it quite the same as the voice for which I long in vain. A young woman is hurrying with quick steps through the wintry streets. She has approached the Caring mansion, but instead of ascending the broad, beautiful entrance, she glides through the garden and up the narrow little steps in the rear, asking, upon answer to the bell, "Is Fräulein Theodora von Caring at home?" The servant bows assent, and the lady hastens forward as one to whom the place is familiar. It is Sibylla who enters Theodora's room, evidently not for the first time, as her words of greeting plainly show that Theodora is an intimate friend. Hastily throwing off her wraps, she draws a low stool close to Theodora's sewing table and says without further ceremony, "Do you think every girl should marry in order to be happy?" Sibylla might have found the answer in Theodora's clear, pleasant face, but the latter looked up smilingly and said, "Are you happy in your present condition?" "No." "And do you think that an outward change would, of itself, make you so?" "No." "I have often," continued Theodora, "endeavored to answer your question, and I have come to the conclusion that an unmarried woman's life need not be joyless because she is single, any more than the life of a woman will be happy on account of having a husband." "You also think," exclaimed Sibylla, "that the blame lies in myself if I am restless and dissatisfied?" Theodora hesitated to reply, but Sibylla laid her head on her friend's lap and said, "You need not answer. I know all." It was very still in the room. Did an angel's wings rustle through it? Then Sibylla talked softly about experiences which her proud heart had never revealed, of her home life, of her mamma, who although so old could not pass a single day without some pleasurable excitement, of the throng of visitors that wearied her and yet must be tolerated because solitude was worse, and they at least amused her, of her discernment of people's follies which she despised while concealing it, of coming home evenings with a troubled conscience, reading Thomas à Kempis, and praying sometimes, concluding with, "I cannot do more, but it does not relieve me." Theodora laughed. "Cannot you bring out of your company something better?" "What then?" "Discern the good," said Theodora, "for society people also have good, noble sides to their character, and a word is often only necessary to open to us these closed-up treasures." Sibylla shook her head. "Society people are all so superficial." "Or appear so to you," interrupted Theodora. "How do you appear, and what do you give to them? I have heard that Fraulein of Herbig is the loveliest, happiest of women to count many conquests among gentlemen as a reward for her coquetry. So you see there lies a mask on everyone in society, and even the best may not show very often his true self in this circle." After a pause, Theodora continued, "Still another thing may be learned here, compassion for the weaknesses of people, compassion which strives to show itself in helpful deeds." Sibylla winced. To do something, really to do, to bring sacrifice.
That a Theodora might accomplish, whose most agreeable employment seemed to be able to supply a need. A flood of thoughts passed over Sibylla. Feelings asserted themselves, whose existence had always been disclaimed. Suddenly, Theodora asked Sibylla, "Have you ever loved?" A slight blush suffused Theodora's face. She understood the question. "Could you love?" pressed Sibylla. "Never or always," was the answer. "Tell me your life history," entreated Sibylla, and to her own astonishment, the reticent Theodora complied with this wild girl's request, who, half kneeling before her, looked up with her great eyes full of expectation. "This will be only for you to know," said Theodora. Sibylla assented as one that could be trusted. "Do not expect any detailed story," began Theodora. "I will tell you in a few words how it happened that my life is so different from the rest of our fashionable family. I know you must have often wondered at it. I am my father's eldest child. I have never known my mother, as she died soon after my birth. My father traveled extensively, and I was entrusted to the care of a French bonne. When I was 6 years old, my father married again. Then there was a mamma, and after a time, 2 children, Arnold and Eugenie. I can tell you very little about my childhood. I believe I was a kind of homebody who continually bemothered her sister and brother. It is necessary to speak of our home life, except that I often envied Arnold and Eugenie their mother's love, for while she was always good to me, I felt that I stood alone. I had my little troubles, but I need not weary you with them. Suffice it to say, my life and prospects were not the happiest. There were questions I could never answer, since the things that most people prized as the highest good were worthless to me, and my mind, guided by no careful hand, often struggled beyond the boundary restricted to women, and I knocked boldly at portals which opened only to the wisdom of men.
Thus I grew to young womanhood. A keen thirst for action possessed me, and as it found no outlet in external channels, it reverted to study. I studied with a real burning hunger. I was soon distinguished as a scholar, although I did not deserve it, and more recognized how little I knew. But in spite of all my acquired knowledge, there was a longing in my soul which never was satisfied. Then came, you shall soon know all, a young tutor in the family to give me instruction in a particular branch. Mamma was always opposed to this, but Papa wished to gratify me. Sibylla, this young man looked into my being and saw there a poor soul, which, despite its struggles and acquisitions, cried out for a delivering answer. He gave this answer. We continued in our position of teacher and pupil, but suddenly there beamed forth from nature, as well as from science, an answer to my unexpressed queries. This answer was God. For the first time I learned that Christianity was not in dogmas and forms, but in its life. I learned that a deep Christ-like contemplation of the world elevates to God-like things, that it even awakens and nourishes spirituality in the most unattractive occurrences of everyday life. I recognized that Christianity holds out to us the highest prospect for the future, and that it also teaches us to be diligent in making a proper use of the opportunities afforded us in the present. Sibylla, I learned all this, but I learned still more. My youth spread her wings and flew joyously heavenward. I loved, and I was beloved. Not a word had been spoken, but there was that secret outgoing of one soul toward another, in which we find the harmony of our deepest, innermost life. One day my parents informed me that my studies must be discontinued, as my teacher had asked for my hand. I declared simply that I loved him. He was poor, but his salary at the university would have amply supported us if we had married, but it must not be. Let me pass over what followed. His teachings would have been in vain if I had not learned to obey the 5th commandment. I did not see him again. Never? Cried Sibylla. Not for a long time. He resigned his position at the university and accompanied a gentleman to Austria.
I never heard from him. Oh, Sibylla, the conflict in my heart was a terrible one. I desired to do wholly what was my duty, and God helped me, and even gave me new love to my relatives. But one thing I have never done. In this point I could not obey my parents. I could never promise love and fidelity to any other man. But we will come to the end. 3 years passed when there came a letter from one of the city hospitals. It announced that I must hasten thither, as a dying patient desired to see me. I was at home alone, leaving a note to my father, enclosing the one I had received. I wrote that I might not return home that night. I ordered the carriage. Oh, Sibylla, I was so restful, not morbidly so, but full of peace. I found my beloved dying. He had been ill a long time and had returned to Berlin to die, at home. Home? He had no relatives on earth, but where I was, there was his earthly home. I remained at his side all night. He never lost consciousness for a moment, could speak but little, but he kept his faith to the end, and I was permitted to see with my own eyes how faith in the only begotten Son of God is the victory that vanquishes even death. When morning dawned, he was in his eternal home. Gladly would I have remained at the hospital to undertake the self-denying, self-sacrificing duties of a deaconess if it had been offered to me. It would have given me a purpose to my life, but this was not to be. Still, my parents allowed me thereafter to conform my life more in accordance with my own will, and I sought from without a mission which was denied me at home. One treasure I held in my hands. My beloved had bequeathed me all his spiritual effects, such as essays, letters, his journal, etc., and I learned much from these. He had a rich soul, rich in love toward everyone that needed help. I was ill for a year after. No heart sickness, my soul had peace in God, but a physical ailment which was followed by a painful surgical operation. This remaining scar, I bless God for it, excuses me from the burdens of society life, and I can live quietly here in my little back room, and last summer I was enabled to enter, as assistant, the hospital which is so full of associations to me. My life is now full of work, but it is also full of joy and happiness. Oh, full of deep and grateful, heartfelt happiness. It had grown dark in the room. Sibylla's head lay in Theodora's lap. As she remained quiet and unresponsive, Theodora exclaimed playfully, "She is really asleep." Lightly stroking her face, she felt it wet with tears. When the lamp was lighted, Sibylla took a sudden leave with a sincere, "Thank you, thank you," and before Theodora could hinder it, she imprinted a warm kiss on her hands. Sibylla read late that evening Goethe's Knowledge of a Beautiful Soul, and she could not help thinking that Theodora really and truly had just such a beautiful soul.
This is the end of part 3. Sibylla's story continues, and we will carry on in the next video. Thank you for listening, and remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. See you in part 4 of Sibylla's story.